Okay, so for all those who follow a solar calendar, today is the new year, so wish you all a happy new year.
Thank you.
So we have quickly seen chapter 6 last class, and as I was telling you, after the first 5 chapters, if we are in a position to handle our work, keep work related issues under reasonable control, then to that extent the mind is a little free. Now the question is, what do I do for the mind? Moment it is freed up with unnecessary small little things. So that is where we brought the context of Dhyana Yoga, where can we focus the mind Can we focus the mind on to a single issue? So this is what Lord Krishna introduced as the last chapter in the first triplet. We saw the basic idea that we have to use this apparatus called mind. We have to use the mind, and only with the mind we should lift ourselves to the higher plane. So uddaret atmana atmanam na atmanam avasadayet. Atmaiva bandhuhu atmanam atmaiva ripuratmanah. The mind can be your friend or it can be your foe. The choice is ours. So he started with that idea and said why mind is a very, very important apparatus with us, and that's the only vehicle through which we can, evolve ourselves to higher levels of existence and so on. Then of course we saw quite a few nitty-gritty details of how do we do this dhyana. So all that we saw. We stopped there last class. So towards the end of the chapter, so what we have seen is the first 2 parts. We saw that mind control is very, very important, and some details on meditation which will help us on mind control. All that we saw last class. So the chapter ended when all these were spoken. Then Arjuna, as usual, he asked a few questions. And the greatest thing about Bhagavad Gita is asking questions on our behalf, because these are the questions we would have anyway asked. So there are 2 very important questions, very practical questions. I keep saying it is very practical because there is this widespread thinking that ancient Indian wisdom is not practical. I can keep on quoting again and again from every text that it is very practical. There are very serious questions, very useful questions. So here are 2 questions which we will see, which Arjuna asked, and with that the chapter actually ended. The Dhyana Yoga ended with a question and an answer, a question and an answer. That's how the chapter ended. We'll see the 2 questions quickly. Arjuna Uvacha. He says, Chanchalam hi mana Krishna pramati balavad dridam tasyaham nigraham manye vayoriva sudushkaram. So Arjuna says, you talked so nicely about mind control. You talked about mind is very important, we have to control the mind, all that. But then he tells Krishna, please understand, the most wavering element of an individual is mind. The most wavering aspect of every individual is mind. Chanchalatva is only attributed to the mind. And mind is a super indriya, because mind only directs all the karma indriyas and jnana indriyas. So therefore, if mind is of chanchala, there is no hope. So that's why he says, Chanchalam hi mana Krishna. And he gives 3 attributes to the mind. He did not simply stop by saying mind is very wavering. He attributed 3 things to the mind. I think we should understand it very clearly. First he says it is pramati. It's very, very powerful. Right? It's very, very strong. Balavad. Right? And dridam. They are little closer terms, but all of them are collectively trying to say dridam is, it is unyielding. Mind, that's why if mind decides, that's the end of the story. It's very hard. Actually, many of the decisions we take are in a way driven by the mind. and the mind take a position, then we lose our power of. That's why people who are very emotional, related to that state of mind, when people become very emotional, what happens? Power of discrimination is lost. Language changes. We use languages which we are not used to, which we think about it much later. Why? Because pramati. That is the power of mind. Just think about this idea. Nobody wants to be sad. Nobody wants to be sad. Why do we slip into zones of sadness? Because the mind for some reason decided I will get into sadness. Nobody can stop it. It's such a powerful entity. Nobody wants to be sad. Then the question is, why are we sad? We have to answer that question. It's very simple. Nobody wants to be sad, but then we also get into sadness. How do we get into sadness? Because it is balavat and dridam. The mind, if it hooks on to something, it is very hard to pull it out. It's very dridam. So he gives 3 attributes to the mind. It says it's pramati, very turbulent, chanchalam, strong, balavat and dridam, unyielding. It won't change. So you are asking me about, you are telling me mind control, when you know very well that this is the very way I have to actually define mind. Mind is something which I can have no control. It is very, very strong. It is unyielding. It is very turbulent. And then he says, you are asking in the name of Dhyana Yoga and all nice things, you are telling us that you control your mind. If you have not understood this line, I will explain it better. So he uses another example to explain what exactly is the issue. He says, Tasya is manas, right? Tasya nigraham, trying to keep it under my control is nigraha. Tasya nigraham aham manye, I think trying to control mind about which you talked. He gives an example. You know how it is? It is vayo riva. It is like catching air. Air is in the akash. How do you catch air? It is the subtlest entity that we have. It is in an open system, and it is like catching air in an open system. So that is the example he says. He says, Tasya nigraham aham manye vayo riva, vayuhu iva sudushkaram. You are talking of something which is very impractical. All that you said are all fine. That you control your mind, I'll tell you sit, and then yukta hara viharasya, yukta karmasya, chestasya, all that you said, everything is fine. But please understand, you are talking about an apparatus which by its very nature is chanchala. Its very nature is turbulent, and you are talking about controlling it. It's like actually catching air. Why are you, asking me to do? So that is a question which Arjuna asked. While you said is fine, but you are talking about something which is very, very difficult. So Krishna replied for that. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Asamshayam Mahabaho Mano Durnigraham Chalam. So the first thing Krishna said is, I 100% agree with you. He said Asamshayam, no doubt. There's absolutely no doubt. So he did not actually waste time saying, no, nothing of that he said. He said, I agree with you. I cannot agree with you anymore, is what he is saying. He is saying, Asamshayam, there is no doubt. Mahabaho, this is an adjective on Arjuna. Manaha durnigraham. Catching, controlling mind is difficult. Why? Because it is chalam. See, in Manusmriti he says, Manayeva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayoho. All these, bandha and moksha, all these that we go through is all because of manas. So that is the most powerful entity which is behind everything which we really, really don't know. We don't think about it. We know, but we don't think about it that much. That's why Manusmriti said, Manayeva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayoho. So that's why he said, Uddaret atmana atmanam, atmaiva bandhuhu atmanam, atmaiva ripuratmanah. The mind can be your friend and the mind can be your foe. The choice is yours. All that he said. So Krishna immediately agreed with him. Yes, I cannot agree with you anymore. This is the most wavering thing. There is a very nice story. Many of you might know this story. To know why it is Dridam and Balavat and Pramati, I'll tell you a very humorous story. One person went to a sage. So he said, I am getting bald. So he went to the sage and said, is there something that could be done? He said, yes, I have a medicine. Not at all a problem. I have a medicine. Exactly in about a month you will become normal. So this man was very happy. He said, all right, please give me that medicine. So he gave him a small bottle of oil. He said, it's very simple. This oil you have to apply every day once in the morning. So this man was very happy. So sage said, but there is only one condition. And that condition is, every day before you apply that oil, you should not think about a crow. That's the end of the story. The moment he said that statement, the mind now knows what to do. So every day morning, the first thing it will do is, what did the sage ask me not to do? Don't think about the crow. If you tell the mind, don't think about something, the mind will think about it. This is the story there. This is the moral of that story. We all go through that, our own understanding of them. This is a humorous story. That is why it is Balavat and Tridam. So that's what he said. He said, the mind is such an uncontrollable, I agree with you. Right? So that is how we start. So that is at a starting point. At a starting point, who have no mind control, yes, mind is uncontrollable. Then he says, but there are two things you have to do. It's not as what you thought. There are two things if you do, over time the mind control can happen. While I agree with you at the beginning, we all will agree it's difficult, but there is a method of mind control which may not happen now, but which can happen over a period of time. So he says, Abhyasena tu kaunteya, vairagyena cha grihyate. So he says, you have to bring two. There are only two ways you can bring your mind to control. First thing is abhyasa. So if you try 100 times, you have to try 1000 times. Abhyasa is very, very important. Without abhyasa, mind control is not possible. That's the first thing he said. So it is not that I did for 6 months, therefore it will not happen if I do it for the 6 month plus 1 day. He says abhyasa is a very, very important element in this journey of mind control. So while I agree with you, at the outset it all looks like that, I am with you on that plane. But I tell you, there are only two ways mind control can ever happen. First thing is abhyasa. In fact, abhyasa is leave alone mind control. For anything we need abhyasa. An athlete who wants to win the 400 meters Olympic gold needs abhyasa and vairagya. See, this is a very generic statement, please understand. Abhyasa and vairagya is required for every one of us in everything that we do in life. Otherwise, we never get anything. So that is the issue he is talking here. The context only changes. The context here is mind control. For somebody who wants to actually win over something, abhyasa is very, very important. That's why there is this proverb. Without ayasa, you don't get payasa. There is one proverb like that. Essentially what he says is, it is commensurate. Efforts are very, very important. The only thing that he is saying here is, the efforts need not be linear. The efforts need not be measured, and the results must also happen proportionally. All those will not work with mind. That's the only issue. So the first thing he talked about is abhyasa. Without abhyasa, mind control is not possible. You can endlessly keep reading, we can endlessly keep discussing. One can argue mind control is possible, not possible. We can take both sides of the position and have a very nice argument. That's not the issue. You have to get there, which means you have to really jump in and see what is possible. It may not be possible. Maybe you start and then you go. That's why in all meditation, I was saying last class also, people who have not thought about it, the easiest thing, many of these things we should not worry too much. I always say, the greatest of the dam in the world can be burst with a hairline crack. All that you need is a hairline crack. One day it will burst. We need really a hairline crack. That's all we need. Let us not worry about when the dam is bursting. The same way in all this evolution, let's not look at this ultimate. We should get on to the right trajectory and keep doing. And not, look back, evaluate, I have put so much effort, what has happened. That are all very counterproductive to this way of personal evolution. So that is the abhyasa. We have to do that abhyasa, is what he said. Then he brings another concept called vairagya. Now vairagya has actually different types of understanding. The first thing is, mind if it is the chanchalatva of the mind is because we are letting it to go and park wherever it wants to park. We are not exercising a choice which we have. We have a choice and we can exercise the choice, and vairagya is one element, one dimension of vairagya is to say, can I start exercising my free will? Every one of us have free will every moment of our time. But if you don't exercise free will, mind takes over. There are only two ways you actually, conduct yourselves. Either you exercise your free will or you let mind take over. So vairagya means that can you fight the battle between the free will and the mind. So if you let the mind, I'll take a simple example. I have time 6 to 7 free. If I let the mind to do whatever it wants to do, then it can actually say, there are so many gadgets, let me take this gadget, press this remote. I mean, that's one way. I am taking a simple example. That's one way. We could have done it and then we may continue to do it like that. But if you use the concept of free will, then you can say, I would like to take a view of doing something which need not be something which the mind likes. It can be something different from what mind likes. So it can come from another perspective. You may say, I want to do something, so let me use this opportunity to take time. I will try to reduce these distractions and do it. When people say, I will reduce my distractions and focus on something, what does it mean? That's also vairagya. It means a certain conscious decision of exercising the free will over and above handing over the control to the mind. That's one meaning. Another meaning of vairagya is vairagya can be understood as a mechanism by which we understand, we develop a high sense of discrimination. See, in life, we can just react to things we can go with the wind and react with things. Another thing is to use a power of discrimination. What I call it as nitya anitya vastu vichara. In anything, it's again an expression of free will. I can think about it, I can say this is permanent, this is not permanent, this is would help me in my journey of self-evolution, this will not help me in the journey of self-evolution. God has given us that capability to analyze. So our ability to bring that capability to the foreground and then keep using it is another way to understand vairagya. So vairagya that people generally understand is, stop eating, don't do this. There are many, niyama acharas which are all classified under vairagya. In a way it is right, because those are opportunities by which you are reducing the temptations that you can get out of the mind. That need not be the only way. That can be a starter to test yourself where you are. Correct? And that could be one way. But I think the theme of vairagya is to say that can I restore this ability to react to an unfolding situation to an objective free will rather than an emotional mind. The more and more we leave the control to the emotional mind, we don't have vairagya. We can't develop vairagya. Your ability to restore that control a little bit slowly, that will build this so-called vairagya. In other words, you are taming the mind in small, little, one step at a time. So that is the meaning of actually vairagya. So Krishna is saying it's an effort. At the beginning what you are saying is right. It's a long drawn effort. The Abhyasa actually points to a long drawn effort. And the effort is on a premise, on a background of saying I should be able to use my free will than leave the control to the mind. When people get emotional and get into a big fight, that's a classic example in which the mind has taken over control of everything. And when the mind takes control of everything, there is no room for any objectivity. There is only room for repenting much later. The objectivity will come later. At that moment, when the mind takes control, finished. You can only react, the words you speak, your body language, your culture will change. You are not that kind of a person, but your culture will change. This mind is so powerful, it can actually... So there are two personalities in us. One personality in which mind is overpowering us. Another personality which could be, if all other things okay, our swabhava. Little bit of our inherent nature which can be camouflaged by the mind when it's very, very powerful. So the only way to do it is to test it. to test it in occasions, think about it, take those small little decisions. Those are all the things which Krishna talks about here. There are a few more shlokas. I have just taken just 1 or 2 shlokas to give the essence. Yeah.
So when you were talking about mind control, the ultimate is you transcend from the world of duality, and there is no, the world of duality doesn't make sense anymore. Now when you talk about Vairagya, where Vairagya actually helps you to get the power of discrimination, right? So when you practice it, you are able to more and more exercise your free will. So my question is, the concept of free will is relevant when there is duality, right? When you have the right and the wrong thing, and you have the free will to choose between the right and the wrong. I can choose to love somebody only when I have the free will to hate somebody or dislike somebody, right? So
no, it's not like that. It's not. This is x is not equal to minus of y. So let me just clarify that. So partly you are right, partly you are not. Somewhere in between it went away. The point is, if you can exercise more and more of free will, and see, as long as you remember this, we have talked many times, so it's very important. In the world of Vyavahara, there are differences. The whole world of duality is where I operate. So it is all about handling duality only. Therefore, if there is no duality, there is no action. I am there, you are there. Something I like, something you don't. This is where the work starts. So as long as we are in work, there is a world of duality. Now the question is, do you leave it to mind or you use the free will, and what is the difference? So if you use free will, 2 things will happen. First of all, it says, perhaps instead of this doing this is better, but it doesn't mean you have to hate it. That is not what it means. What it means is, transcending duality means not saying this is good, that's not good, we should do it. What it means is that you respond to situations in such a way that the world of duality does not matter to you anymore. They exist, they will impinge on you. Whether it matters to you or not is the question. That's a mind issue. See, happiness or sadness has nothing to do with the outside world. Liking and disliking has nothing to do with the padartha. My favorite example is, if I like jalebi, and if the liking part is in the jalebi, everybody in this class must like jalebi. All of us take 1 kg at a time. I may take 1 kg of jalebi at one shot because I like. So what does it mean? It means this liking and non-liking are actually the mappings in the mind, and it's nothing to do with anything happening. It's just mapping on the mind. So the Vairagya will address only that, which means all these will become notional. So Vairagya is a situation in which all these ideas become notional, which means as they happen you go with it rather than taking position. You may start thinking this is how we take decisions, but essentially what it means is, it is only the vibration on the mind which we call it as sadness, liking, not liking, good, bad are all nowhere outside. They are all these signals which are being captured by a radar called mind. So the Vairagya will adjust the radar so that the signals are not processed. That's the kind of a thing. So that comes when people use free will. That's the idea of a free will.
So in terms, Vairagya will help you to get out of duality.
It's not, no, we will not get out of the domain. The context of duality disappears. They all exist. Because it is the mapping in the mind, it doesn't maps anymore.
Then why do you need to discriminate, sir? If the concept of duality keeps diminishing, why do we have the power of discrimination?
Because that is the way we start. That is where we start. Until we reach that, disappearing the framework requires first to do these things. These are all very starting things. As you travel much in the journey, you will actually drop it. This discussion will not make sense to you and me.
It means at the end, when you say when you have achieved mind control, means you no longer exercise your free will?
You exercise your free will, but this notion of I am exercising the free will to discriminate, to make sure we should do right thing, all those will all become blurred and disappear in the background. So that's a real, true free will. You freely exercise your will, not worry too much about all this, because that framework is disappearing from you.
How do you make a choice then? Once you reach there, how do you make a choice?
So that is why, that is a real sannyasi. In chapter 5, that is exactly what Krishna said. They said that's why you don't run away. That state you reach, then let's talk about how to react. We are all sitting on one side and then asking question on the other side, and Krishna said don't do it. That's exactly what he said. He said that is why he heavily discouraged Arjuna when he talked about sannyasa. He said don't talk about sannyasa. You go on this path. Once you reach there, you will actually stop asking. Paul Brenton wrote 10 pages of questions to ask and then came to Ramana Maharishi. He just threw everything out. There was no need to ask questions. So now we are asking questions, we have need to ask questions. As we travel in this path, I don't know, all these will disappear. The question will also disappear. The eraser, if you keep on erasing, eraser will go one day. Because it will become small and small and small and small. One day the eraser will disappear. So all these becomes irrelevant, kind of. So we are in a different stage. We are finding it very difficult to even appreciate what is this talking. That's why I am saying we will put this first baby step. And put the second step and third step, little later perhaps we don't have questions.
In the stage of miracle, the gunas will subside.
Huh?
The gunas will subside.
All that will make, so many of these things which we will see as we go along, many of these things will start blurring. That is the real freedom. Freedom is not suddenly you can fly and when everything becomes irrelevant, that's the freedom. If something becomes relevant, it is not freedom, it is limiting you. Because it is limiting you by affecting you one way or the other. True meaning of freedom is that the whole context disappears. You see only white screen, the movie has disappeared. So called. Yes.
Actually, bringing up the gunas from this question and putting that in the context of the swabhava versus the mind. I was just wondering, would it be right to say that the mind is colored more by the gunas and the swabhava is something that's there in us, unique to us, but not so much colored by the guna, or is the swabhava also colored by like guna?
Yeah, all are colored. Actually, the raw material is a pure, the next chapter 7 to 12, that's what we are going to see. So anyway, so the raw material is pure, absolutely colorless. Then you bring RGB and start painting it. That's called Swabhava. Swabhava itself has the 3 gunas. That's how you make each individual different. It's a RGB palette from which you start taking out. They're all related, which is what the second triplet is going to talk about in some detail.
But it's still higher in terms of wisdom compared to the mind. So what we want to do is put the Swabhava, give the control, the reins more to the Swabhava.
No, not really. They are all single bundled piece. Swabhava is a conglomerate of everything. Swarupa is different from Swabhava. Swarupa is pure. You color all of them and bring the Swabhava into it. That's what he is going to talk about. Then a little later he asks one more question which is also very, very important. That's a much important question. The question goes like this. Arjuna uvacha ayatihi shraddayopetaha yogas chalita manasaha aprapya yoga samsiddhim kam gatim Krishna gacchati. He says, Krishna, okay, now I am convinced that you are saying, so therefore I will do. So I have Shraddha. I don't doubt. I will take faith. Since you said I would agree, I will try. So I will try to, control my mind and so on. I die. Because nobody has lived beyond 120 years as far as in Puranas they give big numbers. But anyway, about 116, 118, one day you have to go. I don't know what is that number, but when he has to go, so he is asking, you said all that, I tried. Seriously, I tried with Shraddha. Okay? He says, aprapya yoga samsiddhim. It didn't happen. It didn't happen, right? What will happen? I could have at least enjoyed life. Next sloka said that I removed all those slokas. He says, I could have at least enjoyed my life. Now I thought that you told me all these. I said Vairagya, Abhyasa, all that I tried. I never made the cut. And the calling came and then I went. What will happen to me? That's the next question he asked. But there are 4 or 5 beautiful slokas answer to that. But there is a fundamental axiom in this sloka. I love this sloka. Krishna's answer to that sloka is here. Shri Bhagavan Vacha. He says, Partha, hey Arjuna, let me tell you, Naiveha namutra vinashastasya vidyate. First he says, right, what he says is, Na eva iha, naiva iha. Not here. Na amutra, not elsewhere. Amutra means elsewhere, iha means here. We don't know whether, in our paradigm is there is a world which exists after the soul departs. We may not know what it is, but there is this basic belief system, there is some other world. So the Amutra always refers to what happened to the soul after the last rites are done here. For the body, the last rites are done only to the body. Right? That's why, English, look at the English language. Look at how they describe death, how they describe, the body is cremated. They never said so and so is cremated. Correct usage is the body is consigned to flames, the body is buried. English language, if you see, even earlier literature, you see, moment death happens, the language, the usage pattern differs. The body is separated from the soul, and descriptions are like that. So anyway, so in fact, the difference between the Western system and the Eastern tradition, particularly Indian tradition, is we believe after death this soul goes elsewhere. So where, let us not worry about it, there is this faith, it goes somewhere, that is this Amutra, elsewhere. So Krishna says, na iha, na Amutra, nowhere it gets destroyed. The effort does not get destroyed. That's the first statement he makes. Vinashaha tasya vidyate. Here it didn't talk about the effort, it talked about the person. That person does not get destroyed. He put effort with good faith. He said, okay, let us, try to do a little mind control. Looks like that's a so-called evolution is prescribed like that. Let me try. First of all, he says, tasya vinashaha na amutra atava iha vidyate. Please understand that doesn't happen. Then he puts a very important statement. He says, nahi kalyana krit kaschit durgatim tata gacchati. This is a very, very important, this is just a matter of faith. You cannot argue on this. Take it or leave it. Faith are all digital, 0 or 1. Don't stand in between. You actually, take it or leave it. Maybe someday you take it, someday you whatever you taken, you leave it. That's a different issue. That's called faith. So he says, nahi kalyana krit kaschit. If somebody has done what is supposed to be good, good means the overall good for the growth of that vyaktitva. Good should not be measured on material terms. In fact, this word good cannot be measured in any of the terms in which we measure good now, which are all in the world outside. You have to measure in the world inside, not outside. World outside is all, materialistic things on which good means having a bigger plot or a good house in Basavanagudi, a 50-80 plot. It may, depending upon whatever, or giving, helping thousands of people, somebody may call it as good. It's not that good. The good he is saying is, there is a world within. In the world within, something good happened for which you endured. He says that will never go wasted. He is making a very confident statement here. Na kaschit kalyana durgatim tata gachit. In our ancient wisdom, you read any text, when the discussion is very emotional, discussions get emotional because I feel very excited, very emotional about this topic I want to tell you, or I feel very angry about, you're telling something. We also do in our common parlance. We get very emotional with people who are in certain conditions. It first happens only with people who are very close. And emotions, two types of emotions. When you are doing something wrong, I get very emotional because I am genuinely concerned. I want to. So the words I use is, son, father, brother. These kinds of words we use. Similarly, when you want to tell something very profound, they use these words actually. Brother, sister. So here he uses the word tata. Oh, my dear son, don't worry. Because he wants to give an assurance. He wants to thumb the desk and give an assurance. That's the word tata is coming. Muda is used. In Bhajagovindam, Adi Shankara hardly used the word muda. He has used twice in Bhajagovinda. Bhajagovindam, Govindam, Bhaja Muda Mate. He said, oh idiot, you please. He got very emotional because the whole story was a very, very old man sat in the banks of a river and he was reading Dhatupata. See, there are 2200 verbs in Sanskrit. One is called Dugrinj. It's called Nyit actually. Dugrinj Karane, he was actually mugging it. So this Shankaracharya, it's a story, right or wrong, but at least there is meaning to the story in terms of the spirit of it. So he asked, what are you doing? He said, I am very old. Now I have come to a conclusion that you have to evolve, your soul has to evolve, your Vyaktitva has to become better, you must be a very evolved individual and so on. And somehow I find that in order to do it, you have to read all the Vedas, so I don't know Vyakarana, I don't know Sanskrit, so let me now start reading the grammar. So he has started mugging this Dhatupata. So that is an occasion which he became very emotional. He said, oh idiot, don't do it. When you read close somebody, you freely use that word. It is not in a derogatory sense. So the word Tata is used, Brata is used. He has used Brata also. So here he uses the word Tata. Oh my dear son, don't worry. Good things will never get destroyed. In fact, if at all an element of goodness continues in the society, a great amount of goodness is there in the society. Mass media will not show it, but never think that there is a phenomenal amount of goodness in the society. If you have an eye for detail, and if you train your eyes, you will see I am seeing plenty of goodness in the society. Why all of them happen? That happens because of this. This paradigm is in each one of us. Somewhere we know good things when we do it. There is no selfish thing. I am going beyond selfish thing. Good things will never get destroyed. It has its effect. So when you develop and develop, so the point he is making is, don't worry about one janma. So birth and death are just commas. It's not full stop. It's just a comma. One journey of one janma is just a comma. It's only a milestone in a project. So there are many milestones. You keep on putting commas on that. That is what he says. So don't worry. Because if you worry about it, you will never make that. And so assure him, he says, Na kaschit kalyanakar durgatim tata gacchati. So that is what he said. And then he also showed him what will happen. I will tell you what will happen. Little bit I will tell you what will happen. Because if I just say this, and there are a few shlokas, I thought He says, Prapya punya kritam lokam ushitva shashvati samaha shuchinam shrimatam gehe yoga brashto bijayate. You know what will happen? This is exactly the 101 of financial accounting. What it says is, you write your profit and loss account for this year. At the end of it, you have retained earning. Positive or negative. Something will be there. And transfer it onto the balance sheet. So if you have positive, then you become cash rich. Retained earnings will go onto the liability side. It's a basic 101 of accounting actually. The more you do that, you have financial leverage and you can understand all these concepts. Similar thing he's saying. He's saying, you collected good deeds. You didn't reach that flash point, which is alright. But you collected a lot of loyalty points, bonus points. There is a mall in which you can first exhaust all of them, right? That's what he is saying. He is saying, Prapya punyakritam lokam, so you will reach that other place where for all the good things that you did, just because I am not able to see it, don't come to a conclusion that nothing else is happening. Life will become very, very narrow. Life will become very hopeless if you take a position like that. Don't tell that I have to see everything in front of me, right now and here. Increasingly we are getting into that mode. That's not a very nice thing. I think with a good faith, we say good things will do me good things. It will happen. Definitely it will happen. So he says it will happen. You will spend a long amount of time for all your good. Your collected points are so much. If you do a lot of good things, you have enough of holiday resort where you can spend time or whatever. Then he says you will come back. You will come back where? Suchinam Shrimatam Gehe. You will come to the next place where the conditions will be so conducive for you to continue this journey. It is like hibernating you. It is like closing the computer and open it after 12 hours. It starts from there. It's called hibernation. Na? Life from one janma to another, next janma is hibernated. And it comes back. And it comes to where it all depends on what you brought. So the question of why did I get birth here? Why did I get there? Why did these 50 of us are meeting every week? These are all a certain kind of a common wavelength on which, common frequency which is vibrating between us. Otherwise we will never come. 100% I am telling you will not come. There is a very interesting serial going on now. We would have chosen to go there, or there is a match going or something. Why did we come? There is a frequency which is connecting us. That is what he says. Suchinam Shrimatam Gehe Yoho Brashto Vijayate. Look at this. Gautama Buddha is example. You take all prophets. You take Christ, you take great seers, santas, Maharashtrian santas. You will find something very interesting. The Gautama Buddha's father was not a Buddha. Gautama Buddha's son was not a Buddha. So this is not a matter of DNA. It is beyond science. If DNA can explain it, yogi, but what it says is this Gautama Buddha will be put in a place where the conditions are so conducive for him to become a Buddha. It doesn't mean father has to become a Buddha and the son has to become a Buddha. That is what Krishna is saying here. That this reallocation problem is a very in fact there are in some Upanishads, they are all very nicely written. Garuda Purana also you will see, I think in Padma Purana also you will see, these are all elsewhere described. I am not getting there. There is a framework which says good things will only add. It will never come, cancel and then get destroyed. So he gives two options. One he says, Suchinam Shrimatam Gehe, you will be born in a place, right, where others need not evolve like you, but others will enable the condition for you to evolve. So you will evolve, definitely. The conditions will be like that. So that's what he says, Yoga Brashtaha Abhijayate, or he gives another possibility can also happen, where he says, Atava, or what will happen? Yoginam eva kule, you will actually be born in a lineage of yogis. He says that's only rare. You see, such a high level of stage when you reach, in our scheme of things, there are only two ways this soul effectively liberates. One is called Videha Mukti. Liberation must happen from here. You have to keep on coming in this Janma, in one Janma it develops escape velocity and that's the end of the story. Right? There is another method which is called Krama Mukti. There are 7 lokas, so the soul does so many good things, slowly moves and goes Sati Loka and then it just liberates. There are 2 methods, Chandogya Upanishad also it is there. So this belongs to that, you get into a very high thing of very high yogis and so on, you get Krama Mukti. Or you come to this place again, but you are in such an ideal condition that while others may not evolve, we do not know, but the conditions will really evolve you. So those are the 2 possibilities he talked about. The spirit of what he is saying is your efforts will not go waste. That credit will never be written off or knocked off. It is with you. That is the assurance he gives. This is a matter of great faith. We have to take it only with faith. And if you don't have this faith, there is no incentive to do good things. Life will be only expectation. I will do something, what is in it for me? Can you do me something else? It will be only transactional. Whereas if you believe in this faith, you will do good things. And you do good things not because you are a fool. You have this strong belief. If I do good things, it's good. Period. There's nothing more. That is the point he is making here. So he says, Yetati durlabhataram. Durlabhataram, this is very, very rare, but this possibility is also there. Loke janma, yedhi, yat idrisham. So there are 2 possibilities to talk about. The spirit of the argument is leave aside the nitty-gritty part of it. The spirit of the argument he is making is believe that if you do good things, it will never go waste for you. Please develop that belief, otherwise you will never evolve. If you want to see everything as, I put something, I could get back something, you will be in a very lower level thing, you will be in that chakkar. You will never develop the escape velocity to go higher.
What happens to mentally retarded people?
See, the entire conceptualization of our scheme of things starts with reincarnation. Because many of these things can never be explained otherwise. Because this is a question which we will find it otherwise difficult to explain. Why would a person, why should a child be born in the utmost poor family? As a child it has done nothing. While it is born in a pauper's family. Next food is not there. Why should it be born like that? It's a question. Correct?
No, mentally retarded, they will not have any chance of doing good things.
So, that is the question. The question is, when you are not using your mind, in this Janma, all that you have done, your karma will never get accumulated. Which means your old karma, the tank will not be filled anymore. So mentally retarded, in fact I keep telling some people, don't think mentally retarded people something bad. Actually they have stalled this karma accumulation. Because in this Janma, whatever they do, because they don't do with what is in it for me, they don't do that I should get this, they are pure. In fact I went to a place called Apurva. it's Autism Society, about 8 years back, 9 years back, I was called as a chief guest. They said, sir, can you come and talk? I must tell you, previous night I was actually wondering, I was feeling very, very sensitive and very fragile because I don't know what to say. Right? But I tell you, by God's grace, I went there, those kids were all showing something, half an hour there was some function, then I went and spoke. My theme was very simple. I said, these 30-40 kids whom I have seen in the last 1 hour, we think they are abnormal. Actually, we are abnormal. They are very normal. They are very normal. Why? Because they are not bothered. They are not saying he is a professor, so let me go closer to him. I know which side of the bread is better. They don't belong to that category. In our worldly thing, they may find it difficult to go on, but they are the absolute purity. I said I saw purity for 1 hour. So the point is, for such people, karma will never accumulate, which means the existing stock will only deplete. This janma, nothing will get added. Please understand, to exhaust the karma, a body is manufactured. In fact, I keep telling this, people who are very sick, who get a lot of sick, mentally retarded is an extreme case, in a way, they have taken an opportunity to dispense away a lot of karma. It is an expression of that. So while there is an agony on one side, don't have agony on the other side, I keep telling people. Because this soul is now in this janma has taken a very complicated, very difficult so-called situation to dispense away. A body is manufactured only to dispense away the karma. So very difficult condition means a lot of karma is going. It's like that actually. There are many such descriptions available which are a little bit here, but in other places you will find a lot more of them.
I think having this confusion with this doing things with a what's in it for me versus doing things in the spirit of the yajna, which as he has accounted for, which is not just for me. And the thing is, even so if I'm doing it in the spirit of yajna, but because I have read in the Gita that this is good and this will accumulate the brownie points for me, which will help me spend some time in purer lokas and come back into a way where I can continue my journey, that's still a what's in it for me.
Yeah.
With which I'm doing the yajna.
Absolutely.
But
see, 10 years back, this ICICI Bank fellow gave me a card called Payback. Okay. So they said, sir, every time you pull a petrol, payback points will go up. For 2 years it was exciting for me. I started like that. It has now receded. I have actually displaced the card. It looks like the point is accumulating. I don't know how much point it is accumulating. What I am saying is, yes, people start like that. But that is called evolution. When the evolution happens, all that will recede to the background. So there is no harm in starting like that. I am very clear about it. There is no harm in starting like that. But that is the evolution. The evolution is all these will recede to the background. That's the interesting part.
What is the formula for this life?
Yeah.
Rather than getting accumulated.
Oh, that is what Arjuna, that is what he is saying from chapter 1. First to stop what is in it for me, your account will not get any debit notes. Moment you have what is in it for me, there are a lot of debit notes in your account.
Next year balance sheet should be 0.
Yeah, so the whole text is talking only about that in some sense. I have to go all over again from the beginning. Anyway, so Nakaschit kalyanakrit durgatim tata gacchati shuchinam shimatam gehe yogo brishto bijayate. All these what is it saying? It is saying it is a sustained journey. That is what Krishna is saying. Spiritual journey is a sustained journey. Don't measure in one janma, don't measure in 5 years, don't measure it in 10 years or 20 years. Not a janma. It's a sustained journey. It is very structured and a sustained process. As I told you, birth and death are mere milestones. They are only commas. That's why in chapter 2 itself he said, Vasamsi jirnani yata vihaya navani grinnati naroparani. Just like the shirt is torn, you throw and then wear another shirt. The soul also says this body is okay, I am not finding it any more useful. It may be very fit. So useful does not mean, see, our understanding is always in a very utilitarian ground. If you understand it, the first question will come is, why did somebody die in an accident at the age of 25? He was muscle strong. So not useful means not in that sense. It says, soul says enough. I don't find any more evolution possible with this frame. So let me just put it down, discard it and go. That's the meaning there. So birth and death are mere milestones or regenerative points in this process. In fact, the greatest learning we can have is to learn a lot about death. In chapter 7 onwards, in chapter 7, last shloka is talking about death. Chapter 8, first 10 shlokas is about death. It's important we should contemplate on death. Don't run away from it. It's not a scary thing as we think it to be. It is not at all. You can develop wisdom in understanding this process called death. Birth and death process we should understand. It's very, very important to understand very objectively. Vairagya will come from that objectivity. That's another. Objectivity brings Vairagya always. Makes you step back and say, don't get too much worried. Let's get going.
Sir, if the soul is the one who decides when to leave the body and when not to, what is the role of the creator? It's created that soul.
No, the soul is the creator. That is a Swarupa in which you latch all colors and make it look as though it is something else. Next chapter, that's the first issue we are going to see. First 10 shlokas. Wait and see. Just wait. Soul is the creator. That is a model here. You will see that. It's a very interesting perspective to it. We will see that. All the 10 major Upanishads has phenomenally discussed this actually. We'll come to it. So there is a careful selection of the next attempt. There are many more slokas. I put a little bit from there. Tatratam buddhi samyogam labate purvaiha dehikam. Like what happened in your last janma, it will select very aligned to that. Very closely aligned to that, it makes the next selection. All that Krishna says. Right? Purvabhyasena teneva hriyate hyavashopi saha. So it is, we don't seem to have a control. This is a process which is actually selecting. Self-selection happens. That's the kind of thing he talks about. It transcends early stages of our activities, understanding, etc. He says, Aneka janma samsiddhim tato yanti para. So it's a process. And slowly it will take you, and then once we reach there, we'll stop asking these questions. All of them will recede to the background. Since we don't know, we ask, which is fine. I think we should keep asking. We should keep asking until we reach silence. When the questions must disappear. And questions disappear because the context for question must disappear. Context for question will disappear only on our perspective of that's a starting point in chapter 7. So we'll go to now chapter 7 from here, where he actually brings us to that situation of how do we enlarge our horizon. So the last sloka in chapter 6, he says, Yoginam api sarvesham madgatena antaratmana Shraddhavan bhajate yomam same yukta tamo matah. So even that person who has developed that yoga, that karma yoga attitude, who can very closely, he is now shifting his argument from karma yoga to bhakti yoga. The next 6 chapters is a great description of bhakti yoga. And bhakti is, in chapter 7 itself, he says bhakti is not the bhakti we generally know, where you sport a much bigger, signs, religious signs, go to temple every Friday or every Saturday, break a coconut. He says that's one level of bhakti. He talks about 4 levels of bhakti. He takes us to the next level of what is this transition can happen when you can manage your work part of it well. Means you know how to handle the world around you. Karma yoga is the greatest way by which you will handle the world around you. You will continue to work, but you will make sure that the reflections that are mapping on the mind, the signals become very weak and it becomes blurred in the radar screen and disappears also. Once you reach it, now what can I do? That's why he introduces the notion of dhyana here. But then he says, what do I do dhyana on? Dhyana is only an idea. What do I contemplate on? I need a raw material to contemplate. I can start with a Om, I can start with a photograph of somebody, my parents' photograph also I can keep, there is nothing wrong. The question is that what you should be doing, or you need a target for your dhyana? That is the subject matter in the next triplet of Bhagavad Gita. The next 6 are beautiful set of chapters. We will start chapter 7 now.
So here that me refers to the soul?
Yeah?
Does it me refers to the soul?
It me refers to the ultimate God here. And then later he says the soul and the God are no different. I'll show you the mapping. Here me is that God, ultimate God, which does not take a shape. It is called Nirguna, not Saguna. Saguna means there must be a shape, there is a complexion, there is a name. Nirguna means it's a concept which prevails everywhere. That's the meaning. In fact, as I told you, after chapter 4, whenever he says I or me, it is actually the Supreme God. That's why he brought Yada Yada Hidharmasya Glanir Bhavati Bharata. He brought that idea and said, don't look at me as this Krishna, then you will miss the essence. You replace me with a much bigger understanding of that all impulsing concept and try to understand this idea. So me and all means that.
Yeah, you kind of stole my question. I was going to ask you if that me, I think from a Western philosophy point of view, me tends to refer to God plus creator. Because there is an equation between creation and God. Maybe that is how she's asking if that me refers to God who is a creator. Is that what? Maybe.
No, because when Sir told the soul is a creator, no?
Yeah.
So that me, with me there is no other person, right? The soul is a God.
Yeah. So until we reach that understanding, we have to keep these differences in place. So temporarily we should keep saying me means that ultimate creator. Once we know how to remove the difference, then that language also changes. So until then it will be like that. Okay, so with this Om Tatsaditi Srimad Bhagavad Gita Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Atma Samyama Yoga. Some people say Dhyana Yoga or Atma Samyama Yoga, both are equivalent. Nama Sashtodhyaya. Now second triplet of Bhagavad Gita starts with chapter 7. So I want to bring this I showed you first time. Now I want to bring it because this is our thread for carrying through Bhagavad Gita. So we are here. In the first 6 chapters, many of these issues were addressed. How do you handle work, change, peace of mind, joy of work, or karma sannyasa, jnana karma sannyasa yoga, karma yoga, all that addressed this. Then Krishna in chapter 6 said that if you have reasonably understood this part, your mind can potentially become a little settled and calm. Now when the mind can become a little settled and calm, turn the mind towards something, otherwise it will slip back and run away. This is like a dog, you have to really train it. So that is where he introduced the notion of dhyana. Now the question is, dhyana is a process. Process for what? Dhyana, what should I do dhyana on? Dhyana is only a process. Now what should I do? Focus that dhyana on. That is what he brings to the second triplet of Bhagavad Gita, where he says, if you are able to address this, there is a good chance this who am I question will come a little stronger in you. In fact, all of us in the whole world have one question. For some of us it is very dormant. For some of us it pops up sometimes. For some of us it pops up very often. For some of us it pops up 24/7. There is all shows different stage. What is that question? The question is, what is the relationship between Jiva, Jagat and Ishvara? There are 3 entities. Jiva, there are each, an individual called Jiva. I am a Jiva. Each one of us is a Jiva. There is a living unit. Then there is a Jagat. There is a world. World has everything. World has these people sitting in front of me. World has my relationship. World has all my association. That is called Jagat. That I see. Then we know that there is some larger principle. I may give a name, not give a name. I may give a different name. That doesn't matter. I know there is something which is a larger force. Now all of us, somewhere in our heart, this question is there. What is this relationship between these 3? They are all independent. So some of the questions, is this connected to that? How is it connected? This question is what is the subject matter in the second triplet. So second triplet positions I vis-a-vis the larger principle of Jiva, Jagat and the Ishvara. That is the spirit of the second 6 chapters in Bhagavad Gita. So you need to bring what is this Jiva, what is this Ishvara, what is this Jagat, how is this Jagat created, and who are you part of this Jagat, what is the connection between you and the Jagat, and therefore what is the connection with the Ishvara. Some of the questions, they are all part of this story. And the story is so beautifully weaved that he culminates this story, brings some concepts and paradigms. He culminates with 2 beautiful chapters. One chapter called Vibhuti Yoga, which is chapter 10, and the 11th chapter called Vishwarupa. And these 2 are great ideas. The idea is, in Vibhuti, what he did was, he took some 72 items. Krishna took 72 items and said, see God here. Masanam Margasishoshmi. Like that. Rutunam Kusumakaraha. Pandavanam Dhananjayaha. So he takes 72 entities and says, I am here, I am here, I am here, I am here. It is called one in many. That's what he tried in chapter 10. In chapter 10, he said one in many. The same thing you please see here. And in fact, our journey is always like that. First, you have to learn to see one in many. If you have mastered that art, you are ready for seeing many in one. I'll give you a simple example. If I bring a small stone, if your mind is so evolved, you will see the million objects in the stone. That is called many in one. But if you have to see it, first you should have a knowledge, what are all the vikaras of stone? I can make an idol, I can make something, I can make some small pieces which can be used for road laying. You should first understand this stone can manifest in 1,000 ways. If you have mastered that art so well, then if I come and show you a stone, you will see all the 1,000 items there. That is what he tried. He said, God is here, God is here, God is here. He said, contemplate on it. If you have mastered it, now I'll show you Vishwarupa Darshana. You should be able to see everything there. That's what he tried. That's how this discussion was so logical. It so beautifully goes there and brings two very important concepts. One in many, followed by many in one. And let me tell you, whether it is management, whether it is personal life or here or there, first you have to know many, one in many. Out of that only you can know many in one. Otherwise you cannot know many in one. You have to first master this art. Then only you will know that. That's the order in which he culminates. Then of course, as it has been the tradition, the last chapter in the triplet is hooking you to the next triplet. So it's called Bhakti Yoga. It's a small, nice 20 shlokas. But anyway, we'll see.
When we were talking about the question, who am I? And the notion of supreme being. That being could be, you can give any name, there is something that is existing. But then, when I want to answer the question, who am I and what is the purpose of my existence? First I need to know my creator, right? Without knowing my creator, how can I understand what is the purpose for which he has created me? For example, this pen. I can understand the purpose for which this pen is created only from the person who has made it, right? So how can we just say it could be anybody, any force, and I'll be able to answer this question.
Yeah, so in fact, the only thing here is, all these questions are simultaneously answered. It's not sequential. So you keep on going back and forth on these questions. When the realization comes, all the questions are answered. Until then they are in different stages. Whereas in this example it's much easier. It's a little easier to manage. You can sequentially answer. Here your questions are very valid. And the questions are asked and then you try on all directions. And if you got the questions, it will answer all of them. The purpose of creation, the creator and who am I, everything has answers which all must seamlessly merge. It's a jigsaw puzzle. They should all match finally. That's how you will get the answers for that. That seems to be the logic here.
I think nowhere in the Gita it answers the why of creation. The purpose of creation is not addressed anywhere in the Gita, right? I mean, it's the what, the dynamics, the relationship, the how, the process.
Yeah, it is not in Gita, but in Taitra Upanishad, for example, there is a very nice shloka. Bahusyam praja yeti satapo tapyata satapas taptva idakum sarvam asrijayata. He says this, of course in Bhagavad Gita it has answered indirectly. Abhyaktani cha bhutani vyaktamadhyani bharata. In chapter 2 he said the creator was a unmanifested lump. Abhyaktani cha bhutani. All forms and names. Please understand, the bubble, the wave, the froth that you get in the ocean, they are all nothing but temporary manifestations of what is called a sheet of water. Wave has no separate identity at all. The bubble which bursts in a half or 2 seconds has no, they all have identity. Vyakta madhyani, but they are avyaktani cha bhutani. It is exactly like that. A sheet of water chooses to rise, then we call it as wave. Then it chooses to agitate.
Yeah, but why does it choose?
No, so there it says, out of the desire to manifest, the creator said, from an unmanifested form, let me become manifested.
What is the trigger to manifest?
Okay, so there isn't a great explanation for that.
Is it art? Is it beauty? Is it entertainment? Is it I'll just do this? Is it I want to do something? That's never addressed.
Yes, that's a bit of Leela. It's just left it at one level. You are right.
Is it play.
It's a
That need,
Question mark, right?
sir, that need not be addressed because that's a place where, it's beyond thought, cause and time.
Anyway, so it has not been much, you are right, it has not been much addressed. There are some indirect references and...
But perhaps somewhere it says that if somebody surrenders to me as a big king, then perhaps he will understand why I am big, what is the reason.
Yeah,
That is also another possibility. That's another possibility to explain. That's a good explanation actually.
What did he say?
He said, you merge into me, you know the answer. See, the question part, see, there are two ways to actually address this question problem. One way is to find an answer. Other way is not to have question. No, true, no? Either way it can happen. One way is to find answer. Another way is the question disappears.
Sarvadharman Parityaja Mame.
Aham tvam sarva papebhyah mokshayishe. Well, it's all very difficult, but since we are at a stage where we are all standing in zero main sea level and we are making great commentaries about Mount Everest. That's the problem we are in. So we put all kinds of, with the photo and all that, we actually do a very ferocious discussion. Honestly, that's what we are doing. Vivekananda always says maps are not territories. Don't look at Vaga border in a map. Go and see. It's a very different world out there. Map will never tell you any of those. Maps are not territories. Territories are different from maps. Map only gives you a contour. So in the same way, we can have the published literature on Everest. In fact, that's why this chapter is called Jnana Vijnana Yoga. I'll come to it. This chapter is so beautifully titled. You can have the complete literature on Everest. You have never gone to Everest. You have got all the literature on Everest, photographs, this, that, and so on, and sit down and thoroughly we'll sit down and do a thorough, intellectual jugglery of what should Everest be, why should we go there, how we should go there, and so on. We can do. That's one part of the story. But as we make the journey, many of these things will disappear. And when Ramakrishna Paramahamsa in his parable says, as you keep on taking steps and going, when you reach the top floor, you find it is very similar like what I saw in the ground. I didn't know what it was. Small child, out of curiosity, it just goes. When you go there is nothing different. So it's like that. So we are in that situation. So I think this is very natural for us to ask these questions. We may get answers, sometimes we don't get answers. But I like his way of interpreting. Once you reach Mount Everest, some of these questions will all disappear. We don't have to actually worry about any of these questions. That kind of a problem is there. Yeah?
It becomes irrelevant.
Perhaps in a way the question itself is a lure. It's like if I just put a form of Krishna to the ultimate God, it's like Krishna is going to say, I've written all these texts, everything is there, the map is there, but if you really want to know why I created, come merge into me. Till then I'm not going to tell you. It's like an ultimate test of come.
In fact, there is one passage in Bhagavad Gita, in Mahabharata, I think after the war, everything was over, one day, if I tell it in a very humorous, in today's thing, Arjuna and Krishna were taking a walk, and Arjuna said, can you tell me Bhagavad Gita? I said, hell with you, that frame of mind and what you listened is not there, it makes neither I can tell nor you can receive. So there is a state of mind to all this.
In fact, you can read Einstein's book. He says beyond a point there is no causation. Why are we saying why? Even the science itself says that there is no causation beyond.
Okay, now I want to introduce a very, very fundamental concept which is used in Vedanta to go to this Jiva Jagat Ishvara understanding. It's called Triputi. There is a word called Triputi which is used in Vedanta very frequently. Triputi is a tripod. It's a tripod with 3 legs. What are these 3 legs? In fact, everything that we do in life, there is a tripod. I put examples here. Let us take one example. Let us talk about eating. I eat, a pair of chapatis. There is a tripod there. There is a bhokta. There is a eater. I am eating, na? So there is a eater. There is a bhojya. Something I am eating. It is jalebi or chapati or dosa or idli or something. Right? And there is a process called bhojanam. You see, there are 3. Anything that we do, there is, as long as we are in the world of Vyavahara, we will be in a Triputi. And what are the 3 Triputis? One is doer or subject. Then there is a destination or an object. For example, you see, sadhakaha. He is a sadhaka. Right? And he achieved sadhya. he reached, for which he endured. And the process is called sadhana. So, there are three. Whenever we are in a world of Vyavahara, there is a subject. So it's not only duality, here we are looking at it slightly differently. There is a subject, there is an object, and there is a process. So I put several examples here. Pramana, Pramata, Pramanam and Prameya. Right? Dhyana, see Dhyata, there is somebody who is doing Dhyana, who is the Dhyata. There is an object on which you are doing Dhyana. It can be a Om, it can be a picture of Sai Baba, it can be something that is called Dheya. You are focusing on that. And the process is called Dhyanam. Right? So this is called Triputi. And do you know what is the grandest triangle here which Vedanta says? I put only a few examples here. The grandest triangle is Jiva, Jagat and Ishvara. Jiva is here. This is what they are saying. Jiva is here. The target is Ishvara. The process is Jagat. The world is used for you to evolve. The process by which you realize, ask these questions or disappear the questions or get the answer for the questions is only through the world. World of Vyavahara and which. That's why Krishna put so much emphasis. How do you deal yourself in this world? Because Jiva and Ishvara and this Jagat, this Triputi, and what do you mean by destroying the Triputi? Means you have taken the difference out. That's called destroying the Triputi. If you remove these tripod's legs, it will collapse. Nothing will remain. So as long as I think I am the doer, I am doing dhyana, there is an object on which I am doing. So there is a dheya, and therefore there is a process dhyana. If you evolve that and this world of duality disappears, the Triputi will disappear. So they stretch this argument to say the grandest triangle known to us is Jiva, Jagat and Ishvara. Anyway, we'll come to it. I just wanted to put this triangle because the discussions are all in the background run on a Triputi which we may not know. So the grandest Triputi is Jiva, Jiva here, Ishvara there, and the process is Jagat. So what does it mean? The life is not for making money. Making money is very incidental. We must do it. I am not at all discounting it. The life is a process by which I want to discover that truth. This is a process. Life is a process. The Jagat, the world in which I am dealing with, is a God-given process for me to discover the puzzle. We don't know what that answer is. We are, trying many things and saying different things. That is the argument people make. That Triputi, the grandest Triputi is Jiva, Jagat and Ishvara. And if you can destroy the Triputi, that's the end of the story there. Work will happen, this duality will go, free will, evil and all are only, there are intermediate discussions actually. All of them will actually evaporate. He is a sannyasi. That's what he spoke about in 5th chapter. That is what Krishna has said. You don't become a sannyasi. You don't ask for sannyasa. You have to become a sannyasi. The fruit has to ripe. You wait. Nature says the fruit has a process of ripening. You can't say I will do, today we do some magic and then ripen it and get into certain other problems. That's a different issue. But the process of evolution is very important. So that is what, so he is now taking us to this Triputi actually. In the second triplet, he is introducing very indirectly, I brought this issue very directly at the front because I want this to run at the background when we look at some of these ideas. So 7th chapter has a very interesting name called Jnana Vijnana Yoga. It's a very nice word. Jnana, in fact in Sanskrit, you can take a root, Jna, here it is. Jnana. Then there are upasargas. If you attach the upasarga, the balat niyate, that's what it says. It takes you somewhere. That is the, I don't remember the exact, that shloka. What it says is, if you put a upasarga, it can actually multiply and enrich and take the meaning elsewhere also. That's the power of this language. You take a root, build it, then keep attaching. You can attach upasargas and pratyayas on the other side. That's how the whole language explodes. So here there is a upasarga, V is attached. Jnana, we have Vijnana, we have Samjnana, we have Prajnana, we have Abhijnana. Just take one word Jnana, you can attach many of these. Jnana can become Vijnana, Jnana can become Samjnana, Jnana can become Prajnana, Jnana can become Abhijnana, Abhijnana Shakuntalam. Prajnanam Brahma, one of the Mahavakyas. So these Upasargas strengthen the meaning. So here he is brought knowledge and another version of knowledge. This chapter is called Knowledge and Another Version of Knowledge, Yoga. We'll see what it is. It's a very nice title actually. So this chapter has 30 shlokas, and so without losing time, he actually introduces this. Now you have to introduce the Jiva Jagat Ishvara. Jiva is known. Now the connection has to be established. So he introduces the concept of Para Prakriti and Apara Prakriti. There is a notion of Prakriti. That's how the Swarupa is converted into a Swabhava. The sheet of water is converted into a wave or a bubble or a foam, whatever. Or a lump of gold is converted into a necklace or a bracelet or a chain or a ring. Something you have to do. That process is done through so the Purusha is the Swarupa, the Prakriti is the one which creates variations. That's the RGB in some sort. Put both of them together, you manufacture now one unit which appears different from the original. Right? So that is explained. First he explains. So now he is trying to create how this world of difference happened from seemingly one. That's where it starts. So first 14 shlokas are on that. Then he talks about bhaktas. There are 4 types of bhaktas. He talks about what happens to those, what kind of things they do, and so on. And then there are certain issues in knowing the process, because now we are talking of this Triputi, na? So a little bit he talks about, and the chapter ends with saying, why is it important? Why is your last moments of your life is important? Prayana kale mam viddhi is what he says. We will remember only that which is close to our heart when we die. That's what I hear. I have no experience now, so I can't tell you. Death is one thing which we cannot explain here. Unfortunately, all other things we can bluff our way out. This I can't bluff my way out. But they say that what we remember at the final moments when we breathe is something which we valued the most. So Krishna says, Prayana kale mam viddhi. Please remember me, and that cannot happen just like that. That you need a lifetime preparation for it to remember him at the 11th moment when things happen. Anyway, he talks about it, and then in chapter 10 he continues talking about death and all that. Few shlokas we will see, and then we will continue in the next class. Okay, now this chapter is called Jnana Vijnana Yoga. So what is the difference between Jnana and Vijnana? Right? We use Vijnana as science. They are all very common parlance use. In Vedanta, you have to have a correct understanding of the words, otherwise we will miss it. So, Jnana is knowledge. Vijnana is realized knowledge. Knowledge about Everest you can read. Knowledge about sugar you can read hundreds of pages. Chemical properties, physical properties, everything. You put 1 spoon of sugar on your mouth, you get a knowledge which is different from all that you read. And we have our own experience, na? Whatever you do, you read any amount of electricity, but don't try it. You can put your hand and switch on, you know electricity clearly what it is. Sometimes you may prove your point posthumously also, but don't try it. But what I am saying is, Jnana is a knowledge. Bookish knowledge, so to say. Vijnana is realized knowledge. In management parlance, they say what is called tacit knowledge and explicit knowledge. Tacit, all these knowledge creating, all these management parlance also uses similar words. See, all of us, what is most valuable is tacit knowledge. And the tacit knowledge is good, it will actually manifest as explicit knowledge. That's why people say he has experience. So, moment is saying a doctor, you go to a doctor, a very experienced doctor, just on seeing you, he or she will tell what the issue is. Where is it coming from? There is a Vijnana there. That would not have happened to that person as soon as he passed out of the medical college, nor would have happened to me. I was the first day of my teacher when I started teaching. Maybe something I may do better after 25 years. All of us have our own quota of that. So, Jnana is knowledge. Vijnana is the knowledge you got out of Anubhava, Anubhuti. Swa Anubhava is the only knowledge worth. In preparation to that, there are a lot of knowledge required. So I am not discounting all these lectures and all these knowledge. That is the first step. But Krishna, what he is talking about is Vijnana. That's why Shravana and Manana and Nididhyasa. You hear, then you keep thinking about it a few times. Oh, what is this? What is this? It should create that kind of agitation. then you take courage to try it and test it for yourself, then it becomes nididhyasa, and then that knowledge is now deeply wired into you, into your DNA, so to say. So that is the difference between jnana and vijnana. So mere knowledge as an idea for awareness is jnana. Born out of anubhava. It is only anubhuti which is ultimate. In preparation for that, you can do whatever you want to do. Ultimate knowledge worth is your anubhava. Nothing is valuable than your experience. Anything. In Vedanta also. In normal life also. Nothing like anubhava. So that is a vijnana. Born out of experience of the idea, which is that's called consciousness. What is this consciousness? It is vijnana. Right? In Taitya Upanishad it says, Prajnana, Panchakosha, it really talks about it. Consciousness is Brahman. There's a Panchakosha, he says, Adihi Bhagavo Brahmheti, it starts, and then Pitaram, Bhrigu goes to his father, Pitaram Upasasara, Adihi Bhagavo Brahmheti, Tagum Ho Vacha. There's a nice description in chapter 2 and chapter 3. So there Vijnanam, So born out of experience, an idea, consciousness, arises from a state of knowing that arises from a state of intensely being. You can know what it to be a good citizen, but if you are in that state of being a good citizen, that's a different thing. So arising out of an intense state of being is vijnana. Arising out of a state of knowing is jnana. So this is actually a low level, that's a higher level. Right? Seat of this is brain. Seat of that is heart. Heart can only invoke very powerful responses and things to situation, not the brain. In fact, in my Bhagavad Gita course last time I did a very nice thing. I put 2 videos and asked them, my students, to just look at the video and then ask them to write a Google sheet. I put a Google sheet. I put 2 videos because I was trying to communicate the heart and brain business. I was not very successful. So what I did, I put 2 videos. One video was a Chinese lady, many of you would have seen. She balances some long pieces of wooden thing. In a very small feather, she keeps on adding big pieces. She keeps rotating. She bends and takes and puts it on the top of it. It's a 7-minute video. I asked them to see. Then I said, I put 3 questions. I asked them, as soon as you see, please, I put a Google sheet. I said, please fill in this question. The question was, which part of your body was affected when you saw this? Is it brain or heart or none? I didn't give a third. I deliberately kept it brain, heart and none. I said, please answer it. Then I said, can you describe with a phrase what this? For example, if it is amazing video, you take out the word video, it's already a video. Use as minimum as possible. Say amazing and leave it. I said. Then the third question I said, what did you feel like doing after you? Is there something happened to you? Did you feel like doing something? 35 out of 53 students actually answered it. Actually, I shared it with my class. I was stunned to see the responses I found in that sheet. This was one video. The second video was a husband and wife, just about 2.5 minutes video. The husband and wife were describing about home, certain kids which they are taking care. Until the, I think 40th second or 50th second, you didn't know that they actually lost both their children in front of their eyes in the tsunami in Kadalur. And they appeared, there was, then we can see a trace of a little bit of sorrow. Until then, you would have never thought about it. They were very, they said we have some 36 kids or 35 kids or something. I put that video also. I said, same question, you answer for that also. It was an amazing set of replies. When it came to this first video, lots of the descriptions were actually belonging to this. Oh, superior skill, amazing, this, that kind of. When they actually talked about the other video, and but there are some of them who said, this weekend I am going there, I felt like, taking my child here from this Sunday. Very strong emotion. You should actually read that. You will find the response that comes out of this is this is very rough actually. That's why 2 people should never have a brain-to-brain talk. They should have heart-to-heart talk. English language is like that. We don't understand the meaning of it. We only say I had a heart to heart. We had a hearty meal. We didn't have a stomachic meal or a brainy meal or anything like that. Right? We never say brain felt condolences. We say heart felt condolences. This this comes in this. If you ask what is this heart, it is not this physiological device. The heart in Vedanta is not that heart which medical terminology, although we point approximately to that. It is a zone, it is a certain zone. And how do you know it? You go to any country, any nationality, any age group. If you ask who are you, he never say I am so and so. He says I am so and so. The hand goes here. This region approximately. That is a region Vedanta says as heart. There is some point there which is your point of ultimate trigger. That's a great trigger in you. That's why people say I. When you say I, nobody touches here, here or here. Nobody bends and say I am so and so. You always do this, no? There is something special about this. This region approximately is called the heart, not exactly that organ called heart. I want to clarify that part. So, how do you obtain this jnana? You have to use your gross apparatuses. You have to use your ear, your eye, your all these indriyas, brain, manas. They are all in chapter 13. We are going to see all of them are what is called kshetra. There is something called kshetrajna, which is beyond all these ideas he is telling in chapter 13. So only you can use kshetra and get it. This you can not get with any of your apparatuses. These apparatuses have no use. Although udaret atmana atmanam, we said, you only make the mind subtle and make it less relevant. That's the meaning. It is obtained only through a very subtle process. It is a deep reflection, something happening within. We don't know what it is. Swami, what is this? He was a Malaysian doctor. What is it? Huh? Shivananda. Swami Shivananda was a great doctor in Malaysia. And one day one yogi came, and that's how he actually transformed. One yogi came to his hospital, and this yogi said, "You seem to have all nice apparatuses and so on. Can you take an X-ray and show my soul?" Like that, he asked a few questions. Use all your apparatuses. Can you show me my soul? Can you all this like that? He was asking a few questions, which has actually triggered this person. You know what he did? He disowned everything. He disowned everything. By walk, he went to the airport. He just, that is true sannyasa. True sannyasa is, should I put a little money so that I cannot walk 10 kilometers, I'll take a train and go. They are not. Sannyasa is a state of mind in which you have actually so apparently he walked straight to the airport. He said, I want to go to India, Himalayas or something. He asked who. He said, I don't know who I am. He said, I am no one. He said, I am. So he didn't have passport, nothing. One of the employee there got treated from him. He said he is so and so. That was the story behind him. And finally he went actually. Right? So that realization happens in the heart, and that's a very strong force, apparently of a different kind. Again, all these, I can only bluff you a little bit. Little bit I may have, but it's very hard to say that. But we can get the jnana about vijnana. Again, it is a jnana about vijnana actually. Right? And what is a good example? God is a matter of fact. A vast majority of us, God is actually a matter of fact. You know why? Because they will say God is there, but at the split moment they say I have to take care of myself. I'll break coconut and all that, but I will have to take care of myself. Feeling will never go. That means God is a matter of fact actually. It's not a matter of reality. If it's a matter of reality, such a thought will not come. God is there. Other people may laugh at them possibly, because they say this fellow is very irrational. They are all okay. I am only saying God as a matter of fact is different from God is a state of consciousness. They are very different. And for a vast majority of us, we may be still reveling here. I don't think we would have gone there. It takes a while to go there. We may be reveling here. God is a matter of fact. That is jnana. For us, God is jnana, not vijnana. So that is the difference between jnana and vijnana.
When we are talking about mind control, so which part are we talking about? Is it the brain or the heart?
Which one?
When we talk about mind control.
Yeah.
So which part are we referring to?
Okay. Maybe I will answer that and close it, because it's a slightly longer answer, but I might possibly try attempting on it. See, when we respond to situations, we are all talking about responding to situations. Mind control, intro, all that come only there. There is a situation, we are responding. The mechanics to the extent what I have understood, the mechanics of responding is, we have what is called karmendriyas, bunch of 5 of them, correct? Then we have another bunch of 5 called jnanendriyas. Jnanendriyas can only transmit signal inside. It cannot do anything. It can say it is hot, it is tasty, it is, this is the message that so and so is telling about you. Whether to hit him and all is a karmendriya. That is not Jnanendriya. Jnanendriya will send the stimulus. Right? And somebody sends a response. Which this fellow do? Take a gun and shoot, or slap him, or shout at him. If you shout at him, use a karmendriya called mouth. Whatever. Now the question is, so this is the stimulus and this is the response. The question is, who is actually doing this? Right? Now, this is a work in progress. I have been thinking, my thinking also changed. Whatever I have today, I will tell. Because I am also quite a bit thinking on it. So, to the best of my knowledge, there are 3 entities. There are 4, another 2 more which is not relevant for this discussion. There is something called mind, there is something called buddhi, there is something called heart. Then there is something called chitta and there is something called ahankara. Let them be there. I think at the moment I don't have to bring in here. Okay? Now, the question is, mind control and all that we are talking about is what? What this buddhi will do, to the extent I have understood, buddhi is a very neutral, objective faculty with us. It will say, you can hit, if you hit, you may hit back, or you may be able to manage it. It's not good to hit, you can show karunya. This will give some 1,000 set of ideas which are all related to this situation. Now the question is, who is taking this decision? Right? So, the question is whether mind takes the decision or heart takes the decision. A person who has more and more of vijnana, to my understand, the propensity for him to take decision originating from the heart will be much, much higher. Buddhi will only give inputs. And for that input, it will go to a database called chitta. This chitta is only a database. Because the moment you give me a puppet, it will go to a database and say this is actually a puppet because it is stored that imagery there. And it is actually fried in coconut oil because that information is also stored there. This is actually a big. That's why people who are become lunatic, the file allocation table is gone in the chitta. You can ask psychology; they will use a similar word like that. This is only a database and memory. There is chitta is memory and database. All of them, smriti, chitta are all used interchangeably. For our discussion, that is not important. Point is, when the response does the response. So who is the? I talked about the master slave. Buddhim tu saratim vidhi, if you remember in chapter 3, right? The point is, who is taking the... So a person who has no mind control meaning not to control and keep it, means where is the point of reference in which the decisions are to be... Mind should be a idea. For a very evolved person, mind must be a dispatch clerk sitting here. For an unevolved person, mind will be the CEO. So the choice is between these 2 extremes. Do you want to keep the mind as a dispatch clerk and take instructions from somebody, or do you say the mind will usurp control and say I am the CEO now? So depending upon that, it can. This is my understanding as of today. After a year, it may change.
So mind in Sanskrit parlance, is that the manas? Mind is manas.
So if I use the correct Sanskrit word, manas, buddhi, okay, this is, you can say hridaya, chitta, ahankara is, what the job of this is to take agency. I did it. Actually, he is going to show you can do nothing. You pull the plug, the whole thing is over. The prana is doing everything. But this person says, I did. He takes the sense of agency. That is called ahankara. That he brings that input into the system and creates a certain set of problems. All that he discusses in a little bit detail. I think we'll stop here. We'll continue in the next class. Thank you.